Hi, I'm Michael Hopkins, but by virtue of watching this video, we are now friends, so you can feel free to call me Muffin. Hi. Anyway, welcome to the first Bunker Artist Salon. Before I get started, let me apologize that this is pre-recorded, but my laptop is kind of sad and old, and it can't really handle running the stuff that I'm using and streaming at the same time, so this is just what I had to do. But I will be in the chat and responding to any questions or comments you might have, so feel free to go ahead and type away in the chat and I will respond to you. Also, after I'm done with the talk, I'm going to do a brief performance. So if you are only interested in that, I'm sure we'll post the time that starts in here, and you can just come back and see just that if you want. So, first, let me tell you a little bit about me. Some of you may know that I was fortunate enough to be the first release on the Bunker label. But what I really do mostly is live improvised performance. So, you know, I've only really made a handful of studio tracks. What I've really spent the last 20-something years doing is, instead of trying to make perfect studio pieces, I've instead been trying to perfect a way to be able to compose stuff in real time that's hopefully compelling electronic music. And I can say that after a couple decades, I am, well, I still have a long way to go. But I will say that I think what I have is pretty good, and that I am attempting maybe a little bit more than the average electronic performer. So, let's see, let me look at my notes here. Okay, so I'm sure you're dying to know all about me. How could you not be? So when I started out making music as a teenager, I was just a guitarist. But I quickly found that I wasn't really good at writing songs, and that I was having a lot more fun just doing really textural stuff. So I would have like a guitar, put it through a bunch of pedals, and then kind of make collages on a cassette 4-track. Then in the mid-90s, I got my first synthesizer, a Roland SH-101, and that really changed my life. I fell in love with synthesizers. The thing that was so great was that I could start with a lot more range of timbre from the synthesizer before I even went to the effects. And since then, I was just hooked on doing electronic music. Now, the process that I used for my live performances starting out is the same that I think is pretty standard for a lot of people, which is I would make a bunch of sequences, MIDI sequences, and then turn them on and off to make my composition. So, for instance, like, you know, you have like a handful of sequences for your kick drum, handful for your snare, hi-hat, tom, whatever, and you turn those on and off, rearrange them, and that's how you get your drum part. And then I would have a handful of sequences sending different notes to my SH-101, and I'd turn those on and off, and while they're playing, I'd, you know, tweak the settings of the SH-101, and that's how I'd get my synth part. And then maybe I'd have another sequence going to a rack mount sampler that would play back little things that I had recorded, you know, pots and pans, and breaking celery, and stuff like that. And so anyway, you turn all these sequences on and off, throw it through a mixing board, send it to some effects, and that's how you do your performance. It's kind of like DJing, but with like 100 different records where each one just has one individual part, right? So the thing about that is it's really great because since you've already made the stuff in advance, it's kind of hard to make mistakes, but believe me, you can. But, you know, everything sort of sounds good together, so it's a really fun way to do it, and it works very well. And if you get very good at it, you kind of get to this point where you can use the same set of sequences and get a lot of different range. Like, they won't sound the same every performance, like you know. But I found personally that maybe after like, a dozen or so performances with the same set of sequences, I would get a little bit bored. Now, in the late 90s, when I was desperately trying to gain access to modular synthesizers, which was not easy back then, I had to do a lot of crazy stuff, I was really fortunate to find and make friends with Charles Cohen, who was a legendary synthesist from Philadelphia. And he became my mentor, and we played a lot of shows together where I would basically do my sequence juggling thing and he would play on top of it. And he really blew my mind because he would come with nothing predetermined. He would just let it rip on his Buchla music easel, and he had this really simple delay pedal, not even a looper, it was just a delay that synced to the clock of his Buchla that he could sort of build up these looping compositions with, and it was really impressive. So I made it my goal to eventually be able to do something similar. But it took a long time. For the next, 15 years or so, I kept doing these sort of sequence juggling performances. And just a little bit about how I was doing that. When I started, I actually hilariously had a tower computer with like a big CRT monitor that I would bring, and all it would do was send MIDI sequences. It didn't make any sound or anything else. It was like literally like turn on and off MIDI sequences from this thing. A little bit later, I was able to get an MPC 2000, and then that became sort of my sequence brain for everything. It would send the sequence information to my synthesizers, my rack mount samplers, whatever I had. And then in the early 2000s, I moved on to using Ableton Live and a laptop. And I've done a bunch of different stuff in between, but I've done all hardware, I've done all laptop, I've done combinations. So anyway, in recent years, since modular stuff finally became something that a regular person could afford, I bought some modular stuff and I put together a performance system sort of loosely based on what I liked about the Buchla music easel, and then started basically trying to figure out how I could record and loop that stuff in real time and do this sort of improvised performance like Charles did, but also kind of add this element of like dub mixing. Like I really enjoy sort of using the mixing board as an instrument, so I wanted to kind of have that element. And so basically what this talk is going to be is me showing you what I've got for a design using a laptop and Ableton Live and some controllers to make this sort of looping, recording, mixing device that complements the synthesizer and lets me sort of compose music in real time. So let's go ahead and get right into that. I'm going to move the camera and just briefly show you what's up with the synthesizer. All right, so this is my modular setup. This bottom one here, this is what I generally perform with. This has stayed the same for quite a while now. It's I really got it where I like it. And then this top one here is just a little boat I put together for a gig that I was going to have before everything got canceled. So I figured I'd just use it today too. So let's look at this one. This is my main instrument. I'm not going to go into a lot of depth about what it does or how it works. I just want to show you basically what it does so you have an idea of what's happening when I'm doing stuff with it off screen later. There's going to be later talks that focus more on synthesizers, at least one. I know the next one is going to be. Anyway, so here's what it is. I've got some oscillators, which are my sound sources. I've got a dual filter to filter it, envelopes, some modulators, and a little make noise pressure points. And that's basically the heart of how I perform. So there's really two main things that this does. The first thing is I can play individual notes, like or like, I can set an arbitrary pitch for each note, pretty basic stuff. And then the other thing it does is I switch a couple things and I get it running in like a sequencer. Let's see here. So that's basically it. Now there's a lot of range that I have within that. But the basic thing is I either played notes or sequenced notes. This top thing basically just does, it runs one patch, which is like a FM, percussive FM thing. Let's see. So, you got your beeps, your bloops, your meeps, your floops, and that's how you make meepy floop. But anyway, that's it. That's really all I'm going to show you about the synthesizer. There's going to be a lot more about synthesis, these talks, and whatever. I just want to show you basically how my laptop integrates with it. So we're just going to move right to that. Okay. So here are my controllers and my laptop screen. I hope you can see this okay. I have live zoomed in pretty big, but this still might not be the best on a phone screen. And also this is a little bit weird because usually I'd have it zoomed out and you can see the whole thing, not just a couple tracks. It works better for the video this way, but just so you know, it's not supposed to be this cramped. Okay, so about my laptop. I'm using a pretty old MacBook Pro. It's a 2012, and it's not even the best CPU that was available then. So, don't be worried that you need a brand new $3,000 Mac to do all this stuff. I've seen MacBooks like mine available for less than $600. That's not cheap, and you'll want to upgrade to an SSD and max out the memory. And of course, you'll need to buy software, an audio interface, some kind of controller. But when you're all done, it's pretty comparable to buying a couple good hardware pieces, a mixing board and effects, and it replaces all those things if you want it to. And while laptops are maybe currently considered a little bit uncool, I think that there are some advantages that a laptop and a controller setup has, and the main one is this. You get to decide what features you have, how they're accessed, and how their state is displayed. So, as I've said, I'm using Ableton Live and controllers as the center of my live recording, looping, and mixing setup. So, my synths audio comes in on these first two tracks. This one, named Modular 1, is that first modular, my main performance synthesizer. And, this channel on the mixer controls it. On the controller controls it. This one here labeled Modular 2 /Slicer, which I'll explain later, takes the audio from the second smaller synthesizer, the one that's just running that sequenced FM percussion patch. And that comes in here and is controlled by this channel on the controller. Now, the rest of these, the 6 remaining tracks, deck 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, those are all, well, they all have the same things on them as the first 2 tracks, but they're blank and waiting for me to record some material onto them. So the basic idea is I get something going on the synth I like, record it, loop it, and then do something different with the synth and repeat the process. That's the basic idea, but there's a bit more to it, as you'll see later. Now, I'm sure many of you are familiar with Live and how mapping a controller to a parameter in Live works. It's really simple. You put Live into this mapping mode, and the screen turns blue, and you just click on the thing that you want to control and then move a controller. I'm not going to do it right now because I already have everything mapped, but that's, for instance, how I got this fader here to control the fader on the screen, right? And that's built-in functionality that Live has, and just with that, you can build a really great instrument for yourself. But if you have the inclination, you can go a little bit further by using some extra software. So what I'm using is a combination of Bohm MIDI translator and then Max for Live, which does come with Live. But Bohm MIDI translator, all right, well, so I'm using those basically to get this sort of extended functionality that I want, where one control on this controller can do multiple things. And this is what I mean. Like, the most basic thing that Bohm MIDI translator does is it takes an incoming MIDI message and translates it into something else. So here's an example. I can hold this button down here, which is like I'm using like a shift button, and then press this button, and it switches the view here at the bottom of the screen from the device view to clip view or back. I don't have a clip recorded on here so you don't see anything, but it switches it so I can change what I'm looking at. So that's something that you can't actually map in Live with its MIDI mapping. It's controlled by a keystroke, F12. So in this case, Bohm MIDI translator is taking an incoming MIDI message from this controller and then translating it into a keystroke that Live is using to switch that view. So here's another example of what I'm doing with Bohm. In this case, I'm using these buttons along here, not to send MIDI to Live, but to send MIDI to my other controllers, these two MIDI fighter twisters up here, and it tells them to switch to a different bank. So here you go, and you can see it looks different, and now it does something else, which I'll show you later. And then another example is this. So these buttons here on the controller, I use them to select a track. So if I push this one, I'm looking at the first track. Now I'm looking at the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, etc. Right? But also, if I hold this button, it'll light up green and something changes in here. I'll show you exactly what later, but just showing you that like a long press is different than a press in this case. I've done that in Bohm. So I guess just real quick, I'll bring up Bohm so you can look at what it is. So here's Bohm MIDI translator. Let me just scoot this over so you can see the whole thing. And so I guess before I start going into it, I just want to say that if it looks intimidating to you, let me just say it's really not that bad. And whenever you dive into trying to use something new like this, I think it's really important to remember that you don't need to know everything it can possibly do. You just have to learn enough to get a basic idea of how it works, and then you go search online to find the specific thing you want to achieve and, you know, maybe repurpose somebody else's code. So for instance, while most of the stuff in here is my code that I wrote, that case of the long press to do something different, that was beyond my skill level and beyond my experience. So I just went online and searched for it and found somebody else's code and reused it. And that's, you know, how to approach stuff like this. Another thing I'll say specifically about Bohm MIDI translator is that their forum is really, really responsive. So I had a question, I posted it on the forum, and a Bohm employee had answered it in like half an hour. So they're really good. So really explaining this in depth is beyond the scope of what I'm going to do in this talk. but I do want to show you just kind of what it's doing. So to get that thing where I was switching the clip view into vice view. Okay, all of these things here in this list are called translators, and each one just takes a single MIDI message and then does something with it. In this case, move this over so you can see. This says when it gets note on with channel 12 at note 12, which is the note that this button sends, it should instead send out the keystroke F12. And you dial all that in over here. It's as simple as like, here's the incoming message, here's what I want the outgoing message to be. Now for some things it gets a little trickier, and there's a really simple scripting language that you can write some code in here to make it do more advanced stuff. But I'm not going to show you any of that. But what I will show you is that, okay, so these things in this list are called translators. And this list over here, they're called presets. And they're just groups of translators. And they can be either active or inactive. And so in this case, this translator lives inside this preset. And you can see right now there's a little box here. And it's unchecked. And that means that this preset and all the translators in it don't do anything right now. But if I hold down this knob, you'll see that the check mark comes on. So elsewhere in this code, I've told it that when I have this MIDI message coming in, to activate this preset. And when I let go, to deactivate it. So that's what's happening there. So hold this, it's active, press the second button, and this translator will fire off. So that's what that is. It is, it's the thing about this is it's really not hard, but it can be kind of tedious. And but I think it's worth the effort to really get your controller to do the kind of stuff you want it to do. All right, let's go back to live. All right, so what I'm going to do is go through all the features that I have set up here one by one. So let's start by looking at the first track here, Modular 1. So as I said, this is where the audio from my performance synth is coming in. And, turn it up, turn it down. It's simple enough, right? But then the next thing it does is I have these knobs here controlling high and low pass filter. So you can see that the high and low pass filter is in this rack that's on track 1. And if you use Ableton, you're probably familiar with racks, but I'll just let you know. Racks are Ableton's way of combining and consolidating control for multiple different devices. And it's incredibly useful. It's how I get most of the cool stuff I have happening going. But anyway, right. So these knobs here are controlling a high pass and low pass filter. I'll show you a little bit what that sounds like. Let me get a little bit of a longer sound. You can dial in the frequency band that you want to hear. So it does that. But then if I hit this button here, I'm changing the slope of the filter's cutoff. So what that means is I have it set up so that when this light is on, it means the filter is at a 24 dB per octave slope. And if I have it off, it's at a 12 dB per octave slope. It just means the tightness of how it cuts. The 12 dB is more relaxed and lets more above and below the cutoff frequency come through. And the 24 is a little bit tighter and cuts it more sharply. Oh, and the other thing it does is if I engage this button, now, okay, so when that light's off, the high and low pass filter are really clean and transparent. But when I turn this one on, it switches to like more analog character filter, and if you just play it right now, it's a really subtle difference, but it is a little smoother. But I can dial in some like resonance and overdrive like this. You know, independently for the high and low pass. And so, you know, that's not crazy exciting, but it's a really nice thing that I go for when I just want like a little more dirt or like a kind of like squelchy filter or whatever. Okay, and this functionality that I just showed you is repeated on all the other tracks, as is everything else I'm going to show you here as I keep going. So I mentioned that these buttons I use to select which track I'm looking at. But also, if I hold it, like I showed you before, it turns green, and you can see that this rack here has changed too. And now, instead of these knobs controlling a high and low pass filter, I have panning and a low pass filter. So, and I can switch it from a high pass to low pass. I mean, from low pass to high pass, so now it's high pass. Now it's back to low pass. Pan it, and then it also does have the same thing where you can change the character from the clean to the more dirty analog. Same stuff. So basically that's how I'm having these two knobs be able to control two different things on a channel. And it's, you know, selectable for each. So I can have this channel be panning and this channel be, you know, whatever I want. Any combination of which functionality. So, next thing I have here is, this knob here is an effect send to a delay. It is pre-fader, so I can just, now we just have delay, or I can have dry wet. And I've got its parameters over here. If I hit this button, it'll just quick take the device view so we can see what the delay is doing. And we'll put something through it. It's got a high and low pass filter. It's got, you know, time, of course. And feedback. And an overall volume, so I can have intense feedback, but sort of tone down its level in the mix. So that's my delay. Again, repeated on all the tracks. The next thing I have is a little insert effect. Let me go back to looking at that track. And it is a little frequency shifter and ring modulator. So let's see what that does. So as I turn up this knob, it's going to turn on the effect and change its dry wet to more wet. And then it has parameters over here that I can change. Let's get it going. So, frequency shifter now. If I switch this, it goes to ring modulator. It has a LFO that can modulate the frequency. And if I engage this, now it's clocked to the clock. Now it's free. And you can get can get, you know, quite a range of fun modulation effects out of that. I was doing kind of extreme stuff, but it could be more subtle and like chorusy too. The next feature I have is if I push this knob, it turns green, and that means it's now going through a beat repeat device, which is over here. So you can see the rack turning on and off. And let's see what that sounds like. And its parameters are over here, so. Get some fun rhythmic variations with that. And moving right along, this row of knobs are my reverb sends, so I can send this out to a reverb. And the cool thing about my reverbs is that, I'll go ahead and push this, this will show us the reverb rack. I have like, I'm pointing at the screen like you can see my finger, that's not gonna work. Anyway, so my reverb that I'm sending to is actually a whole list of different presets that I can change with this knob. So and then I also have a high and low pass filter for the reverb return. That's how that works. All right, let's see, where are we? Oh, and then there's one more thing that's cool about my effects. I just gotta change the switch on these. The other thing I can do with my effects is, you know, feed them back into each other. So I'll just send this sound to the reverb. And as I turn up this knob, it can get pretty intense really fast, but I can get a kind of controlled feedback network going and get these kind of big clouds of texture. That wasn't necessarily the greatest demonstration of it, but whatever. You get the idea. Make sure everything's normaled. All right. So now there's two other devices on this first track, Modular 1, that aren't anywhere else. The first one is boring. It's just a tuner, so I can tune the root note of my oscillator. And then the second one is this looper device that I use when I want to do like sound-on-sound looping. And let me just see if I can get something going with that real quick. I won't belabor it, I'm just gonna quick do something. So it's just a basic sound-on-sound looper, and you would play it maybe something like this. I'm gonna start it looping. And now it'll play back what I played, and I can add stuff on top like so. And when I'm done, just hit loop, and now it's repeating that, I can keep adding layers if I want. Right now, this green light is telling me that it's playing back. If I hit it again, I must have double tapped. If I hit it again, it'll go into overdub, switch between overdub and play, and if I double tap, it'll stop. So, real quick about that, that's the first spot in this set where I needed to use Max for Live, because the looper device in Ableton, it works really great when you map a controller to this button here, but it doesn't send any kind of LED feedback for what state the looper is in. So I had to make a little max patch. I'm not going to open it, but I had to make a little max patch to read that state. So it observes this state, and then it sends it to another device that's out here on a MIDI channel, and this sends out the MIDI message to tell me what color, to tell the controller what color it should be. So Max, this is, barely doing anything with it. Max is super deep. I mean, it could take a lifetime to really master it. But again, like I was saying about Bohm, don't feel like you have to know everything about it to do something with it. You just need to know enough to go grab bits of code that are already out there and reuse for your purpose. For instance, this one I built, I just cobbled it together from stuff that was actually pre-made and included with Max. So it's, you don't have to be a genius to make this stuff work. Trust me, I'm absolutely not a genius. So don't be intimidated. You should just dig in and go for it. So, all right. Well, those are all the basic functions that I have on each of these tracks. And except for the looper and the tuner, they're repeated on all of the other tracks, right? So these first two are just monitoring the outputs of my synthesizers, right? But then these other ones that are blank, that's where I want to, record stuff so I can build up. And so let me just show you how that works. The first thing I'll show you is that with the looper, for that I generally I'll build up a loop that I like, and then I'll just, down here there's a little thing where you can drag it, and I've just dragged that out onto one of these blank tracks, and now that track has the material that was in that looper on it. Can't see it over here, I can't scroll, but that's okay. So now, okay, great, so I play this guy, and now my looper material is over here, and I can go back to the actual device, and I can clear out the loop so that I could, go ahead and do something else with it. So that's how I deal with the material that's on the Ableton's looper device. Now, before I show you the next part, just keep in mind that during a real performance, I'd be queuing this stuff up in my headphones first before the audience heard it, and setting up a sound, getting it so it works with the other stuff. But, this is just a demonstration, so I'm just going to, record whatever's on here, and look, if it's good, it's going to be a total accident. So, okay, here's how I do it. Let's say I have something going over here, and it would be handy if I actually did. And let's say I absolutely love that. That's the best thing I've ever heard. So what I do is I'm going to go ahead and record arm the track that I want to record on. let's say this fourth one that we don't have anything on yet. So I go ahead and hit this. This LED lights up, it tells me that track's armed. And then, oh, right. So then these buttons down here, these are all mapped to the first 4 clip slots of each track. So we're on deck 4 here. I go look at deck 4. These first 4 clip slots here are what these are mapped to. So when I want to record this thing, all I have to do is press one of them, and that selects which slot it's going in. So I'll press this one, and now you can see I'm recording. And then whenever I'm ready, I can hit it again. I'll turn the fader up, and it immediately starts playing back and looping. So now I have that recorded over here. All right. So obviously I can do the same thing to, record that onto any of these other tracks, right? But wait a minute. If I have 2 different synthesizer inputs coming in, how do I record the other one? Well, I have set up here, if I press this button, it lights up red, and that lets me know that the second modular, the smaller one, is now what's feeding the record inputs. So let's get one of those. So let's see if there's something on here. There sure is. And that's fine. I wonder what it sounds like with this. It's acceptable. So I'm going to go ahead and arm this track. And let's record it. I meant to get 2 bars, but I accidentally got 3. That's okay, though. So now I have stuff recorded on all these channels. Okay, now here's the deal. All of those... Okay, well, no, let me back up. When I'm recording that way, the way I just showed you, all of that is pre-fader and pre-effect for these. So even if I had these faders all the way down, it would still record that audio at full volume. And even if I had crazy filtering going on and going through effects, none of that's going to get recorded. But let's say I did want to record my filtering and the position of the fader and and effects. Well, I did come up with a way to do that. So this button here switches between the first and second synth pre-fader, but this button switches between both of those and a whole bus of post-fader. So when I turn this on and the light is red, that means that now the input of these channels is being fed, instead of by these, it's being fed by a bus that I have set up. And the way that I add stuff to that bus is I'll hold down my shift button, and then I'll press this first one for track 1. And now you can see that this LED has changed red and it's pulsing, and that's letting me know that I've added that track to the record bus. So let me do something with it. Get some effects, or I don't know. That's fine. So now I'll just pick a track to put it on. Let's put it on this one. Arm this track. I'll throw the fader up just for when we play it back. And now I can, I'll record something. Here we go. And now when I go to play it back, the recorded track has all of that, and the including like the volume, like where the fader was set. So now here's where it gets really fun. So now I'm going to just do a little mixing performance with these 4 things we have recorded. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add all of them to that post-fader bus, like so. So I can see these 4 are glowing. That means these 4 are going to that bus. And then I will record all of that over here on this track. And again, I mean, I can't, this is not really going to be like an impressive performance, but just to show you how it would work. All right, let's go. And there you go. I have captured that whole performance, and now it's on this track, ready to be further manipulated. So that's basically it. That's the heart of how I perform. I basically just do that and repeat the process over and over again. Now, I guess I'll briefly show you how that record bus actually works. If I go over here, you just see I have a group called record bus, and that, if we look at our ins and outs for the tracks, you can see that they're all getting their audio from this group called record bus. And if I go to the record bus, inside of it, there's 2 groups. One's called modulars, one's called post fader. And you can see that this button here toggles which one is, active. And then, okay, inside the modular one, we see, modular 1, modular 2, and this one toggles which one of those is active. Okay. So, and then inside the post fader group, I just have a track for each possible input for the record bus, including one for all of the effects that are always on, and then the other ones, are, turned on and off like I showed you. So just a kind of, that's how I'm hacking together my recording routing by using groups. It's pretty handy. Okay. So that's basically what I do, but wait, there's more. And I've saved the most fun stuff for last. But I am going to take a quick break because I'm getting some weird clicks and stuff, and like my poor laptop is like burning hot, and it's not really handling this screen recording and playing at the same time very well. So I'm just going to take a break, and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Boy, my laptop really hated that. I think that was the hottest I've ever felt it. But, so you can see it's gotten a little darker now. It needed a minute to just rest. But okay, let me just show you the rest of what I have to show you. So, like I said, I saved the most fun stuff for last. And the first thing I want to show you is this. All right, so I have, you might have wondered why track 2 says mod 2/slicer. Well, that's because I actually have it set up so that I can switch track 2's source. Instead of being the second synthesizer, I can switch it to being this slicer device. So to do that, I hit this button, lights up green, and that reminds me that I'm now on slicer instead of the synthesizer track. And to use it, the first thing I do is I use my shift button and hit this, and that'll show the slicer on the screen. And there's actually something already in here, but generally how I use it is, it works best with a 2-bar loop, so I have recorded a 2-bar loop before. Let's see. This one. So what I do is I find the thing that I want to slice, display my slicer, and then I just drag the clip onto it. And boom, now it's in there. And what happens is I have this little controller here. Now usually it's on my lap, but to show you, I'll put it up here. And let's see if it's working. And it is working. Gotta get a little bit more volume from my headphones. So the idea here is that it's automatically sliced up that sample into slices, and I can play them back from the different keys now. So and it has a couple cool different modes. This one right now is just arpeggiating at 16th notes. But I can engage this button here, this one, and now as I add more pressure, there's a filter that will open up, so it's like this. Right? And the other cool thing is, if I engage this, instead of it arpeggiating at 16th notes, the speed is controlled by the position on the key. So here. And I can combine that with the filter too. It's really fun when you have like the original thing playing too, so like so that's basically what that does. I actually do have a couple more features that I'm working on that aren't quite done yet, but that's what it does right now, and it's fun. It's pretty cool. The next and last thing I want to show you is my drum sequencer. So I wanted to have a way that I could quickly create kind of nice, non-repetitive drum stuff with very little user input. So just like a few presses and you get a whole bunch. And right now it's very much a work in progress. But I'm pretty happy with what I've got so far, and let me show you. Hopefully we don't run into any bugs, but I don't have this 100% perfect yet, so we might. And also, just so you know, the kit that I have in there that it's playing is far from perfect. A lot of it's just like I picked random drum sounds, very basic drum sounds. I just wanted to have something to hear while I was programming it, and I have not gotten around to actually making a real kit for it. Like eventually when it's done, I'm going to be able to switch between different kits, and it's going to be cool. But here's where it is at right now. So the first thing is it lives on the 8th channel. The 8th channel is also a regular audio channel. Like I can do all the stuff I was doing with the other ones with it. But I can switch it over to be the drum machine by holding my shift and pressing this button. Lights up green to remind me I'm on the drum machine now. And now this track is going to be drums, not audio. So the first thing I want to do is, well, let's look at the actual drum machine. If I just shift and press this, it'll bring up the drum machine. And then I'm going to go ahead and switch the page on the MIDI Fighter twisters over to the sequencer. So when I go here, you can now see my sequencer running lights going, and that's telling me, what the position of the sequencer is. So let's say I want to write some kick drums. I hold down my button that I use for kicks, and then I program where I want them on the grid with these buttons here. And all right, so here, let's just put some kicks on there. Oh boy. So I can also erase them like this, or I could, clear them all out at once by holding the kick button and then pressing shift. They all go away. And then I have 5 more channels with different notes. So, all right, so here's some kicks. Here's some toms, I don't know. Here's a snare. Hi-hat. And then I got, I don't know, some other percussion stuff. Let's see what it is. Okay. So, pretty fun, but nothing that remarkable. And of course, all I really have here now is a 2-bar loop that is going to get boring really fast. And that's where... Oh, right, another thing is this page also, all these dials right now are displaying and controlling the velocity. So if I just I'll just do this and we'll get some louder notes and quieter notes. Right, okay, but cool. But still, that's going to get boring really quick. So let's take a look at this second page. I hit this, and I still have the colors that are telling me what drum note is on what part of, where the different drum notes are. But now the display has changed because this page, this page is my ratchet page. And so what that does is, I'm going to turn it on for this step. All right, and so now we've got just like a note repeat. Now here's the thing. When I'm turning it to the right, it's doing that processing, that note repeat ratchet processing before, I'm sorry, after the thing that the next page is going to do. But if I turn it to the left, it'll do it before. And you'll see why that's interesting or important in a second. So let's look at the third page. So this page does two things. The first thing it does is if I turn a steps knob to the left, it'll decrease the probability that it plays. So let's, I'm going to put in, a couple more kick drums, but then I'm going to turn their probability down. And you'll see what happens. They're not going to play every time, only some. So that's pretty cool. Now I've got like some variation happening. Now the thing that happens if I turn them to the right is that they'll have a chance of selecting a different drum sound. So let me turn that up for all of these kick drums. I don't know if this is going to be interesting or not. I'll turn it up for this too. And that, and we'll see what happens. Oh, yeah. So you can see if you look on the screen, so for my kick drum, for instance, it's now occasionally selecting another one of these kicks from this row. And the way I have this organized is like this. I haven't color coded it yet, which I really should do, but these ones are all the red, or the kick drums. These are all the, I don't have any written, but they're the yellow ones, which would be the toms, snares, green, etc., right? And then it can select from one of 4 options. But if I turn it all the way to the right, it'll actually start selecting from all of the different things, so you can get some weirder variation. Let's see, let me put something on here too, and get these way up. Let's see what happens there. I'm actually not 100% sure if it's working right, but I think it is. And so let me just show you one more thing. So like I was saying about the ratcheting, the before and after, let me ratchet this one before that next processing and see what happens. Oh, yeah. Well, I gotta admit, I'm not entirely sure that it's working correctly, but okay. Anyway, I'm just gonna clear all these out. And show you the next thing, which is pretty cool. So far so good. You can definitely see how you can get a lot of variation just with a little bit of input. And look, there's, like I said, this is a work in progress, but I think it's going to be really cool when it's done. The last thing, though, that I want to show you is that there's more to it than that. The next thing it does is I can actually switch. So right now I've got 32 steps running one after another, but I can switch it so I have 2 16-step sequencers running in parallel, like this. So now we see the running lights. Oh, well, there's another thing too. I must have had this set up like this before. I can also control the number of steps for these. So let's, right, now we've got 2:16. And I can even go ahead and have 4:8. But, so 4 parallel sequencers with 8 steps. But this gets really cool when you change the step length. So maybe I'll do something like this, where I'll... Oops, that's not what it's supposed to do. Let's try that again. There we go. So now, this is 8, this is 7, this is 6, this is 5. And if I put like a single note or a little pattern on each of them, the pattern's going to move across the bar line because the step lengths are different. So you can get really cool stuff doing that too. So let's just, I don't know, I'll put some kicks here. I'll put a tom here and here, and I'll put a snare here, and I don't know, one of these percussive jams like this. And let's see what that sounds like. Oh, this one's too long. So you can see that can be really interesting too. So look, there's a lot more I need to do with this. And I haven't played with this at all yet. I've just been working on programming it. And so I'm sure as I play with it more and try to like actually make music with it, I'm going to find things that I want to change about it. I know that there's things I want to add to it. I know for sure already that I'm going to add a different time base for each of the sequencers. So I can have this one running in like quarter notes and this one in triplet eighth notes and this one, you know, like that. So you get a lot more variation going on. But, you know, just to get it to the point where it's at now has been pretty much 3 solid weeks of working on it every day, like for a good portion of the day. So it's a lot. And I'll probably do another video showing exactly how it's working later and put it on my own YouTube, but it's too much to get into right now, I think. So anyway, that's it. That's all I've got to show you right now. I guess now I will go try to play the damn thing. But, you know, keep in mind, all I've been doing is building new features in this thing for the last month, so I'm a little rusty. And I've never actually performed with the slicer or the drum sequencer before. I might decide not to really use them that much, but maybe I will. I don't know. We'll see. See how it goes, see how it feels. And, of course, before I play, I want to thank you all very much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the talk, and hopefully maybe some of you found some inspiration to dig into personalizing your own setup. And, you know, if you did enjoy it, I plan on making more videos that are more like formal tutorials on my YouTube channel, which we'll put a link to in here somewhere. And, you know, let me know what kind of stuff you'd like to see me demonstrate or build, and I'll do it. And also, if there's interest, I'm thinking about putting some of my racks, or maybe even the whole template set, including like the you know, settings for the controllers and the BOEM program. If there's interest. I don't know, maybe somebody has the same exact controllers and they want to check it out. I could possibly do that. If somebody's interested, I'll put it up. So, oh, and the other thing is, I'm definitely at least going to be putting one or two Ableton racks up for free on my Bandcamp page soon. So you can check there in the near future and see if I've left any fun little things for you. Also, I am available for private lessons or consultation for Ableton Live or for synthesis in general. Feel free to send me an email. My email is leisuremuffin@gmail.com. leisuremuffin@gmail.com. Or, you can DM me on Instagram or Twitter or, whatever social media. All right, so that's it. I'm going to maybe take a walk. I need some food, but then I'm going to move the camera and do a little performance for you. So thank you so much. Hope you enjoy it.